It was an ordinary Thursday evening when Alex decided to come home early, hoping to surprise his wife, Julia. As he stepped into the house, he heard laughter coming from the kitchen. Smiling, he set down his briefcase, expecting to see her chatting with one of their friends, maybe planning the weekend. But as he approached the kitchen, he froze. Julia's voice was carrying, laced with excitement he hadn't heard in years. She was talking with her friend Rachel, and what he overheard stopped him cold. And then he asked if I wanted to meet up again. I almost couldn't say no. He looked so different from the usual guys, you know? Julia said, her tone flirtatious. Alex's heart skipped. Different guys? Rachel laughed. Oh, Julia, you're just playing with fire. But I get it. It's refreshing, isn't it? He's nothing like your Alex. So predictable, so safe. Julia's response was almost a whisper, as though she was trying to convince herself. Safe, yeah, but I just needed something more. You know, something to feel alive again. A sinking feeling began to grow in Alex's stomach as Rachel chimed in. And remember, you deserve to feel alive. Meeting men who make you feel wanted, that's what keeps things exciting. You can still be a good wife while indulging a little on the side. No harm done, right? Alex felt like his body was turning to stone. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. In the years they'd been together, he'd always thought Julia was happy with their life, their routines. Sure, they'd lost some of the thrill over time, but he never imagined she'd actually turn elsewhere. The conversation continued, each word cutting deeper. Julia spoke about how she felt she was losing herself in their marriage, about how routine had suffocated her spirit. As she listed grievances he'd never heard her mention before, he felt betrayed and ashamed that he hadn't seen this unhappiness growing. Then came a twist he never saw coming. You know, maybe I'll go out with him again this Friday. Alex thinks I'm at yoga, and, well, he's never questioned it before, Julia laughed. It's too easy sometimes. Rachel's laugh echoed, so you've got it all planned out? Gosh, Julia, you've really become quite the little secret keeper. Feeling like he might be sick, Alex quickly slipped out of earshot, his heart pounding. In the safety of the hallway, he tried to process what he'd heard. He thought back to the past few months. Had she always been going to yoga every Friday? He realized that this yoga nights had seemed perfectly normal to him. Doubt gnawed at him. How long had she been hiding this? Had she become a completely different person when he wasn't around? After a few minutes, he heard Rachel leaving. Alex hurried to the garage, pretending he'd just come home. Steeling himself, he walked in and called out to Julia. She greeted him as she always did, but he noticed things he hadn't paid attention to before. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her hug felt practiced, like something she had done 1,000 times without thinking. That night, Alex lay awake, questions filling his mind. Should he confront her immediately, or try to gather more information? His instincts, though pained, told him to wait, to see if there was more she was hiding. The next morning, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. He decided to dig deeper, knowing it would only hurt him more. He started with her phone, but there was nothing unusual there. Just as he was about to give up, he checked the messages she'd exchanged with Rachel. He discovered that Julia and Rachel had used a code word, referring to her outings with other men as yoga classes. In disbelief, Alex scanned through the messages, each one leaving him more horrified than the last. The details, the planning, the excuses, it all read like a handbook for deceit. Julia wasn't just seeing one man. She had carefully scheduled multiple encounters, woven into their life so naturally that he had never suspected a thing. For the rest of the week, Alex watched his wife with fresh eyes, noticing every detail. Her slight nervousness, the way she kept her phone close, how she seemed absent-minded. By the time Friday rolled around, he had made up his mind. When she announced that she was leaving for yoga, Alex fought back the anger that simmered within him and nodded, forcing a smile as she left. Alex waited until he was sure she had gone, then followed her in his car, keeping a safe distance. She didn't drive to the yoga studio. Instead, she pulled up to a small, upscale bar in a part of town he had rarely visited. Alex parked across the street, watching as she met a man he didn't recognize. They embraced, and his heart shattered as he watched her lean in and kiss the stranger with an intimacy he hadn't felt from her in years. As he sat there, every memory of their relationship played back in his mind. The small, tender moments they once shared, the dreams they'd built together, all of it felt tainted, rewritten by this betrayal. By the time Julia returned home that night, Alex had already left for a hotel. She texted him, asking where he was, but he didn't respond. In that silent room, with no answers and only pain, he wondered if he had the strength to confront her, or if this broken trust would quietly erode any chance they had left. The week dragged on painfully for Alex, the previous Friday's betrayal a constant, searing presence in his mind. When he'd confronted his brother Brian about Julia, Brian was shocked but supportive. Brian, Alex's only sibling, was his confidant, a dependable presence in his life, and he agreed to help Alex uncover the truth. That's when Alex devised a plan to confirm Julia's infidelity with undeniable evidence. On Friday night, Alex and Brian, along with their friends Mark and Sam, parked a discreet distance from Julia's chosen bar. Alex had shared everything with his friends, all of whom had been just as stunned as he was. They wanted to be there for him, helping him expose Julia's actions and put an end to this cycle of deceit. Brian had even brought a small camera, ready to record every moment. Julia left the house at precisely 7 p.m., her casual goodbye and slight smile almost sending Alex over the edge. But he remained composed, bidding her goodbye with forced ease, then watching as she backed out of the driveway. A few minutes later, he and his group climbed into Brian's car and set out, trailing Julia from a distance. When they reached the bar, Alex parked his car across the street, watching Julia as she met a tall, well-dressed man with dark hair and a tailored suit. The man greeted Julia with a kiss, slow and deliberate. Alex clenched his fists, but Brian placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "We'll get everything, Alex. Just hang tight," he whispered. The group watched in silence, every glance, laugh, and touch between Julia and the stranger confirming the worst of Alex's fears. After an hour, the stranger left, and Julia checked her phone before ordering another drink. She seemed to be waiting, so they waited too. Alex's stomach twisted as a second man, younger and casually dressed, approached her. This time, Julia's body language was even more intimate. She leaned in close, her hand grazing his arm, her laughter loud and free. Mark raised the camera, zooming in to catch every damning detail. Each time she looked around, their hearts pounded as they hid in shadows, but Julia seemed oblivious. Brian whispered to Alex, "How many more?" "She's meeting multiple men in one night." Alex swallowed, the truth crashing over him like a wave. Seems she's been meeting more than one. I don't even know this woman." Brian's eyes were fierce with sympathy and anger. "You don't deserve this, Alex." "No one does." An hour later, Julia and the second man left together, heading toward the back of the bar. Brian and Mark followed as quietly as they could, rounding the corner and aiming the camera just in time to see Julia embrace her new partner in the alleyway, their shadows dancing in the dim light of the street lamp above. But the night wasn't over. After she parted ways with her second lover, Julia re-entered the bar and soon met a third man, shorter but athletic, his arm possessively wrapping around her waist as he greeted her. They ordered drinks and laughed together, the kind of laughter Alex hadn't seen from her in years. The camera captured the moment in perfect detail, the casual touch of her hand on the man's shoulder, the way she leaned into him as if the rest of the world disappeared around them. The group watched in tense silence, each man feeling a mix of outrage and sorrow for Alex as they recorded her betrayal. When Julia leaned in for a kiss, Sam's anger boiled over, and he muttered, "She's unbelievable. And she's doing all of this without a second thought. How could she?" Brian nodded grimly. "It's like she has no guilt, no shame. Like she's someone else entirely." At one point, Julia excused herself and went to the restroom. Seizing the moment, Alex and Brian entered the bar, moving quickly to where her phone lay on the table beside her drink. Without hesitation, Brian lifted it, finding it unlocked and open to her messages. He tapped on a recent conversation, revealing texts with each of the men she had met that night. The messages were intimate, teasing, filled with plans and coded language. Alex barely restrained his rage as he read each line, every message confirming that she had been lying for months, deceiving him and leaving him in the dark. Mark tapped his shoulder, signaling that Julia was coming back. They quickly returned to their hiding spot outside, their minds spinning with anger and disbelief. Alex's resolve hardened. He couldn't let this betrayal remain hidden any longer. She had made a fool of him, disrespected their marriage vows, and he felt she should answer for it. As they waited for Julia to finish her date, Alex thought about his next steps. Confronting her here in public could expose her to everyone in the bar. But he knew Julia, knew she'd deny everything or make excuses if he approached her without undeniable evidence. The video footage was solid, but he needed more. The group followed Julia when she left the bar, heading toward her car with her third date of the evening. They were laughing together, their steps casual as they leaned on each other. As she unlocked her car, Brian recorded their entire interaction, capturing the affectionate farewell they shared. Just as they separated, Brian whispered, "This is it, Alex. She's done." The moment was tense and quiet as they watched Julia drive away, each of them processing the shocking reality of what they'd witnessed. It wasn't until she was out of sight that Alex finally spoke, his voice a mixture of pain and exhaustion. "I don't know how I'll ever face her again. She's not the woman I thought I married." His friends were silent, each unsure of what to say, knowing that any words of comfort would only ring hollow in the face of such betrayal. Over the next few hours, they gathered their recordings, editing the footage into a single, undeniable reel. When they played it back, each shot was more devastating than the last. Julia laughing, touching, kissing, and planning with each of her partners for the night, the cold evidence of her disloyalty flashing across the screen in heart-wrenching clarity. The following morning, with the video saved and ready, Alex prepared to confront Julia publicly, a decision that would expose her betrayal in the harsh light of day. In the final moment before he hit send, he thought back on their years together, wondering where things had gone so horribly wrong. But he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same. The following morning, Alex sat in his study, surrounded by files and bank statements. He knew the first step was to protect his finances. Julia's betrayal had shown her willingness to deceive, and he feared she might try to exploit him in a divorce. Alex picked up his phone, dialing his lawyer, a close friend from college named David Kentucky. David was calm and practical, an expert in divorce and financial law who had seen countless clients go through betrayals just like this. "David, it's time," Alex said, his voice steady but laced with bitterness. He quickly filled him in on the evidence and his decision to proceed with a divorce. David listened intently, his voice calm as he replied, "Alex, it's smart that you're doing this now. We'll make sure she doesn't drain anything from you before the paperwork is even filed. Let's go over every account, every asset, and make sure we secure your side." Together, they began to strategize. First, David recommended that Alex cancel all joint accounts, credit cards, and any financial connections he shared with Julia. He logged into their online bank accounts, one by one, and moved his portion of the funds to a new, private account. He transferred his salary to the new account and rerouted all income sources away from anything Julia could access. After each transfer, he felt a weight lift. Every dollar moved was a step toward freedom. As he worked, an unexpected text appeared on his phone. It was from Ben, Rachel's husband. Ben had discovered Julia and Rachel's conversation the night before, realizing that his wife had also been unfaithful. The betrayal was painful, but he wanted to discuss how they could both protect themselves and coordinate their steps. They met later that day in a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town. Ben looked exhausted, the betrayal etched deeply into his face. Unlike Alex, who had only recently discovered the extent of Julia's deception, Ben had been noticing Rachel's odd behavior for months but hadn't been able to confirm his suspicions. "Alex, I had no idea they were both so deep into this," Ben began, his voice trembling with disbelief. "It's like they've both been living double lives, right under our noses." Alex nodded, offering Ben a sympathetic look. "We're both in the same boat now. And I think we need to be smart. Divorce is ugly, especially with everything they've hidden from us. David, my lawyer, can probably guide us both if you want." Ben agreed, and they spent the next hour mapping out their financial protections. Alex explained how he had started securing his assets, and Ben quickly followed suit, calling his own bank to initiate similar transfers. They shared insights on everything from redirecting income streams to changing beneficiaries on insurance policies. Their plan extended to property. Alex owned a vacation home in the mountains, which Julia had always loved and often brought up in arguments as her escape. Not anymore, he thought grimly. He called his real estate agent and began preparing to list the property for sale, ensuring that any profits would go to him alone. Ben, too, had assets to protect. He and Rachel had recently invested in a small beach condo, which they had planned to use for family vacations. In light of the betrayal, Ben was determined to keep it out of Rachel's reach. He began the process of converting his ownership to a sole account, moving swiftly to prevent her from accessing or leveraging it in any way. Meanwhile, David continued offering Alex advice on legally securing his funds. "This process can get messy, Alex," he cautioned. "Julia might try to claim her share in unexpected ways. With spouses who've led double lives, it's common for them to feel entitled, even when they're at fault." Alex tightened his grip on the phone. "David, I'll do whatever it takes. I don't care if I have to move every penny. I won't let her walk away with anything she doesn't deserve." David suggested Alex also gather documentation to safeguard his financial interests fully. He advised Alex to prepare copies of every joint tax return, investment record, and even old pay stubs, anything that would show his contributions versus Julia's. Alex dug through his home office, scanning every document and uploading them to a secure cloud drive, out of Julia's reach. As he organized the files, an idea crossed his mind. He picked up his phone and texted Brian, who had helped him gather evidence the previous night. "Brian, meet me at the house tonight. We need to go through Julia's things. I want to see what else she's hiding." That evening, Brian arrived with a sense of purpose. They started with Julia's study, sifting through her papers and files. They found hotel receipts, each one tied to different dates she'd claimed to be at yoga. Her phone bills showed a staggering number of late-night calls and texts to unknown numbers. With each new discovery, Alex's anger hardened. Then, in a folder tucked away at the back of a drawer, they uncovered financial statements Alex had never seen. Julia had opened a private savings account over a year ago. Her secret stash had grown significantly, showing that she had been funneling money away from their household expenses and even some of Alex's own funds. She had been building a separate life financially, preparing for an escape route long before he'd even suspected her infidelity. "Unbelievable," Brian muttered, shaking his head as he examined the documents. "She was planning her exit all along, Alex. She's not only betrayed you emotionally, but she's been stealing from you." With these documents as proof, Alex knew he had a powerful case to reclaim his money. David agreed, advising Alex to add these findings to his divorce file. A few days later, Alex sat down with Ben again to update him on his findings. Ben, who had found similar evidence against Rachel, was equally stunned and disgusted. "It's like we've been living with strangers," Ben muttered, running a hand through his hair. "How can they do this, Alex? How could they live with us, laugh with us, and still keep all of these secrets?" Alex's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to stay focused. "I don't know, Ben. But now it's about protecting ourselves, and that's exactly what we're doing." Finally, they both sat with David, outlining their cases and creating a legal strategy. They each filed for divorce, armed with airtight evidence of their wives' infidelity, financial deceit, and abandonment of their marriage responsibilities. David, ever the efficient lawyer, drafted clear demands. Julia and Rachel would receive no part of Alex's and Ben's assets, no claims on their property, and minimal support due to their infidelity. As the final paperwork was being prepared, Alex felt a grim satisfaction. For the first time since discovering Julia's betrayal, he felt a sense of control returning. He looked forward to finally closing this chapter. By the end of the week, Alex had taken every possible step to secure his finances. Joint credit cards were canceled, the vacation home was listed, and his investments were shielded. As he packed up the last of Julia's things, he felt a surprising sense of relief. The house felt lighter, as though her secrets and lies had weighed down every room, every wall. Now he was free to move forward, to rebuild. Ben, too, finalized his own preparations, and the two men shared a silent understanding. They had been blindsided by their wives' betrayals, but they had reclaimed their lives in every way that mattered. Their future, at last, was in their hands alone. The day Alex decided to reveal Julia's betrayal to everyone who mattered, he was armed not only with evidence but with the knowledge that his family and friends deserved the truth. The video recordings, the text messages, and the financial deceit had left no doubt about her actions. Now, he would leave no doubt for anyone else. It started with a family gathering. Alex arranged a small dinner at his brother Brian's house, inviting their parents, close relatives, and mutual friends who had been a part of his and Julia's lives for years. The room was buzzing with small talk, laughter, and warm greetings, but Alex was steeling himself for the storm he was about to unleash. As dinner ended and everyone settled in the living room, Alex stood up, his face calm but his hands slightly trembling. He glanced at Brian, who nodded supportively, then cleared his throat. "I asked all of you here tonight because there's something you need to know," Alex began, his voice steadying as he continued. "For years, I thought my marriage with Julia was strong. I thought she was loyal, that we were building a life together." His voice grew cold. "But I was wrong. Julia has been seeing other men behind my back, and it didn't just happen once. It's been going on for months, maybe longer." A stunned silence filled the room, faces shifting from shock to disbelief. Alex reached into his pocket and took out a USB drive, plugging it into the television. A few clicks later, the screen showed video clips of Julia with different men, each one a scene of casual betrayal, laughter, intimate glances, kisses shared in dimly lit bars. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Brian's wife, Megan, clasped her hands over her mouth, tears welling in her eyes as she watched Julia's actions laid bare. Alex's parents looked heartbroken, their faces a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. And then, there was Rachel, who had come to support Julia but was now watching, horrified, as the truth about her friend and the scale of her involvement came to light. Megan spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. How could she do this to you?" Brian, his hand on Alex's shoulder, added, "We all trusted her. But she betrayed all of us, not just you. She deceived our entire family." Alex nodded, feeling a slight relief as the room absorbed the enormity of Julia's actions. "It's not just me," he continued, his gaze moving to Rachel, who was frozen in her seat. "Julia had accomplices, people who encouraged her and even covered for her." Rachel's face turned pale, and before she could respond, Alex's phone vibrated. It was a message from Ben, who had been following a similar path of exposure with Rachel. He had gathered his friends and family at his house and was sending Alex updates as he went through the same painful process. Outside the immediate family, Alex took the next step, sharing the evidence with close friends and neighbors who had seen him and Julia as a perfect couple. He wanted the truth out in every corner of their lives. One by one, he contacted friends from their neighborhood, people they'd hosted barbecues with, couples they'd vacationed with, and even Julia's own best friends who had been completely in the dark. The neighborhood chat groups lit up with messages and reactions, friends shocked by the revelations. By the time the evening ended, Alex's decision to publicly expose Julia's infidelity was making waves beyond his closest circles. It wasn't long before neighbors were exchanging shocked calls and texts, recounting their disbelief. Those who had considered Julia their friend reached out to Alex, some expressing sympathy, others grappling with the uncomfortable truth. But Alex wasn't finished. Armed with Julia's contacts and the identities of the men she'd been seeing, he took another decisive step. Alex tracked down their spouses and partners, gathering names and reaching out to each one individually. It was difficult to imagine the heartbreak he was about to unleash, but he believed the other betrayed spouses deserved to know. The first woman he contacted was Lisa, the wife of Greg, the well-dressed man Julia had met first on that Friday night. Lisa's voice was shaky as Alex explained, sending her a few of the videos he had gathered. She was initially stunned into silence, then started crying softly. "My husband," she whispered, her voice breaking, "he swore to me he was just working late. How long has this been going on?" "I don't know all the details," Alex replied gently, "but it's been happening for at least a few months." "I'm sorry, Lisa. I know this is painful, but you deserved the truth." Lisa thanked him, and by the end of their conversation, Alex knew that her marriage, too, was likely over. With every spouse or partner he informed, he heard the same disbelief, then sorrow, and finally, anger. The weight of each call was immense, and by the time he finished, he felt emotionally drained but resolute. When he called Emily, the fiancée of the athletic man Julia had met second, the reaction was explosive. Emily screamed in frustration, devastated that the man she was set to marry had been hiding such a betrayal. "He was supposed to be different," she said bitterly. "All this time he was just cheating? With your wife? Thank you, Alex. I don't know what I'm going to do, but thank you." Alex felt a pang of sympathy, knowing her pain mirrored his own. With every revelation, he felt a mix of guilt and relief, torn between the satisfaction of exposing the truth and the sorrow of seeing lives unravel. Meanwhile, Ben was dealing with Rachel's fallout. Rachel, who had encouraged Julia's affairs, was faced with a torrent of judgment from friends and family alike. Ben's family, once close to Rachel, was stunned by her involvement. Friends began distancing themselves, unwilling to support someone who had not only condoned infidelity but had also actively pushed Julia into it. The ripple effect spread further than Alex had anticipated. He discovered that a few people from their extended social circles had known about Julia's infidelity but had stayed silent, unwilling to confront her or tell Alex the truth. Once confronted, these friends made weak excuses, but Alex severed ties with them, unwilling to forgive their complicity. In the days that followed, Alex's story, and Julia's betrayal, became the talk of the town. People who had once looked up to them as a model couple now saw them as a cautionary tale. Julia's reputation was in tatters, her friendships crumbling as more people learned about her deception. And Rachel, her confidant, faced similar consequences, with friends turning away and her own marriage likely ending in divorce. As he watched the fallout from his actions, Alex felt a strange sense of peace. He knew he couldn't undo the pain Julia had caused, but by exposing the truth, he felt he had reclaimed a measure of justice for himself and for everyone else she had wronged. The public revelation was brutal, but it was also cathartic, a final closure to the life he had once thought was real. The divorce proceedings had finally ended, leaving Alex feeling like a survivor emerging from a long, exhausting battle. With his finances secured, property settled, and Julia legally removed from his life, he could now take his first steps toward a life unburdened by betrayal. One afternoon, Alex decided to take his mind off everything by joining his brother Brian and their friends, Mark and Sam, for a casual outing at a new cafe near the city park. There, Alex was introduced to Sarah, a friend of Mark's who had recently moved to town. Sarah was an art therapist, her gentle demeanor and warm smile instantly putting Alex at ease. She had a calming presence that was both refreshing and intriguing, and as they talked, he found himself unexpectedly drawn to her kindness and humor. The cafe was buzzing with life, the smell of roasted coffee beans filling the air as Sarah shared stories of her work and how she used art to help people process their trauma. Listening to her speak, Alex felt a flicker of hope, realizing that he wasn't alone in trying to rebuild a shattered life. She understood the weight of betrayal and loss, though her own story remained unspoken. Over the next few weeks, Alex and Sarah began meeting regularly, always with the intention of just talking as friends. But as their conversations deepened, so did their bond. One evening, as they walked by the lake, she paused, looking out over the water with a thoughtful expression. "It's hard, isn't it? Starting over, when everything familiar feels broken?" Alex nodded, his voice quiet. "It feels like I don't even know who I am anymore. Everything I thought I had, it was all a lie." She smiled softly, turning to him. "Maybe this is a chance to discover who you are without the lies. To find out what you want, not just what you thought you had." Her words lingered with him, echoing in his mind long after they parted ways that evening. She had planted a seed of hope that took root, prompting him to finally let go of the anger and resentment he had carried. During this time, Brian and his friends continued to be Alex's pillars of strength. They encouraged him to embrace the life ahead and distance himself from the shadows of the past. On weekends, Brian took Alex hiking, pulling him out of his comfort zone and pushing him to explore new places. They climbed to the top of ridges and watched sunsets, each one feeling like a metaphor for a new beginning. Mark and Sam organized meetups, small gatherings with friends who supported Alex, including Sarah. Each gathering felt like a celebration of his resilience, their encouragement reminding him that he was no longer a victim of Julia's choices but a man rebuilding his future. Months passed, and Alex's connection with Sarah grew. They shared quiet dinners, hikes, and conversations that stretched late into the night. Their relationship remained a comforting presence without the weight of expectations. Sarah knew he was healing, and she gave him the space he needed while offering the unwavering support that felt like a salve to his wounds. One evening, as Alex and Sarah were preparing dinner together in her small, art-filled apartment, she surprised him by handing him a blank canvas. "Paint something," she said, her eyes warm with encouragement. "Anything. Whatever you feel." At first, he hesitated. The last time he'd picked up a brush was years ago, back in college. But he took the canvas, dipping the brush into a vibrant blue. With each stroke, he felt the weight of his past slipping away. By the time he finished, the canvas was a series of chaotic but beautiful colors: blue, green, streaks of red, reflecting the tumult and hope that had marked his journey. Sarah watched in silence, her hand finding his as he stepped back to admire the mess of colors. As their relationship blossomed, Alex realized he was experiencing something he hadn't felt in years: peace. There was no tension, no secrets, no nagging doubt lingering in the background. Sarah was honest, her compassion and understanding grounding him in ways he hadn't thought possible. She accepted his past without judgment and encouraged his dreams for the future. With her support, he took steps to reinvent himself further, diving into new hobbies and reconnecting with interests he'd set aside. He signed up for a local cooking class, learning techniques and dishes he'd always wanted to master. With Brian's encouragement, he joined a weekend soccer league, rediscovering his love for the sport he hadn't played since college. As Alex continued to build his life, he distanced himself from reminders of his marriage to Julia. He sold the house they had shared, choosing instead to move into a cozy townhouse closer to the city. The new space was free of painful memories, and he filled it with things that reflected his journey and his newfound peace: paintings from local artists, photos from his hikes with Brian, and even a few pieces of art Sarah had gifted him. In time, Alex introduced Sarah to his parents, who were elated to see their son finding happiness again. His mother, who had quietly endured the pain of seeing her son betrayed, took Sarah's hand, squeezing it as she welcomed her warmly. "Thank you, Sarah," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for being there for him." By the end of the year, Alex felt like a different man, a man who had faced unimaginable betrayal but had come out stronger. He and Sarah had settled into a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. With her encouragement, he pursued personal projects and goals he'd always postponed. He even began volunteering with an organization dedicated to helping people recover from traumatic relationships, using his own experiences to help others find their strength. Looking back, Alex saw the dark chapter with Julia as a painful but necessary turning point. It had forced him to confront his own needs and desires, pushing him to break free from an illusion. The divorce, the public exposure, and the support from family and friends had been the stepping stones to a life more honest and fulfilling than he had ever known. At a small gathering with his family and friends on New Year's Eve, Brian raised a glass, grinning at his brother. To Alex, he said, his voice proud, for rebuilding his life and proving that it's never too late for a fresh start. The room echoed with cheers and laughter as Alex lifted his glass, his gaze settling on Sarah. She smiled back, her eyes sparkling with pride and affection. Surrounded by the people who had stood by him, Alex felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope for the future, a future that, at last, was his alone to shape.